We do all this stuff. I was very excited when I was writing this slide to look up the translate thing and discover we added a bunch of new languages to our translation and APIs. So we've got some right to left languages, some Asian languages, nice complicated ones like Indonesian and Malay. But among other things, we are one of the sponsors, they're called, the owners, if you will, of schema.org. And this talk is in the developer session and not the linked data session, because schema.org, it's metadata for search engines, it's got lots of linked data ideas in it, but it's meant for ordinary developers. Yeah. All the people who think, oh wow, all of those linked data people with the brains the size of planets and working on very complicated stuff, the people who think that about linked data are the audience for schema.org, the users. Schema.org is what metadata promised way back in the 90s, where if you put some information about your web page, search engines will know more about it and use it. You'll be able to get better ranking, you'll be able to get search engines being clearer about exactly what your pages do and don't do, so they will be found with more relevance and more accuracy. The reason why the metadata promise failed in public search engines, in Yandex, Google, in the 90s, was that it was used for spam. All the metadata, to a first approximation, all the metadata we got was spam. And so we started ignoring it. The reason, or a major reason why we now have gone back to saying, oh, yes, do put metadata in, is we're much better at detecting spam. And if we find spam, we just drop that site to the end of the 400 million pages we've found dealing with that topic. So we can now, as a search engine, reliably use this information, which we couldn't do 10, 12, 15 years ago. Some basic things about it. The information that you add to your content can be added in a variety of formats. You can use microdata, which was created by a Google guy for HTML. You can use IDFA. You can use JSON-LD. We're not particularly interested in syntax wars. We're interested in information. So we will happily add syntaxes as fast as we can figure out how to do it reasonably well. It's a flat vocabulary. If you are a linked data freak, it's just one flat namespace that is schema.org / and then names. And it's owned by Google. Originally it came from Google, but Google, Yandex, Yahoo and Bing are the 4 sponsors. The technical discussion happens in public, but we make the decisions about what will and won't get into it. And right now it's used by about 10% of the public content on the web. So in 2 years, that's a huge adoption of a metadata or linked data system. It is very common and it is growing very fast. We have documentation in English. For those who can't read the slides, they explain that it's basically rubbish and needs to be fixed with drastic changes. There are some other things that we need to do. So, we picked names for the concepts we have, and some of them are really silly, or some of them are very, very specific. And so action, which we wanted to change, refers to a specific type of muscular movement. Anything that's marked as action, we think that means a specific type of muscular movement in a specific medical context. That turns out to be stupid, because when most people see the word action, they'll put that and say, yeah, this is about some kind of action. Our documentation will improve and our choice of names improves. We're in the process of adding multilingual examples. We're in the process of making schema.org a bit more friendly to the multilingual web. Because it's linked data, because it's just information, you can use schema.org terms in any language. And we see a lot, Yandex obviously sees a lot of this stuff in Russian. There's massive uses of it. But we have just started down the path of, as schema.org, explaining how to use it in Russian and thinking about what happens when people do. As I said, we work in public, we have our discussions in public, we have a wiki where we put proposals, and we are adding various areas every couple of weeks. Typically, we will add something. We've been improving our publishing system so that we can actually add things in less than 6 months, which was what it used to take us. And we have a policy where pragmatic changes, i.e., someone looks at a piece of the schema.org stuff and says, hey, this is really stupid and should be fixed really fast. We actually change things quite fast. What this might mean is that if there are names that are very problematic or names which conflict, for example, in the original versions, we had a lot of terms where the only difference between a name was sometimes it started with an uppercase letter and sometimes it started with a lowercase letter. Great for English, everybody understands, every programmer in linked data understands that property with a lowercase p is a property, whereas property with an uppercase p is a class. This is a very common idea in the way you write source code for linked data, which is great for people who live in that world, is absolute garbage mystery to ordinary developers who can't tell the difference even if they realize there is one, and is very difficult to translate to languages that don't have case. So problems like that are being fixed, and sometimes being fixed quite ruthlessly. We just drop all mention of the things that were bad from the documentation and provide a new version of it. Generally, the search engines actually keep on supporting it for some time. Schema is used by search engines. We don't tell you exactly what we do with it because search engines work by making the SEO world keep on guessing and keep on figuring out what's going on so that we can keep on second guessing them and taking spam out and focusing on things that are relevant. But roughly the sort of things we do are quite common. People understand basic search engine optimization, having content and saying things. When you go to a search page, when you open up Yandex browser and you get we have little quick links in the browser, so if you open an airline site, you might get a quick link in the address bar to the registration, check-in or to bookings. When you open a search page and you get nicely structured information about something, so you open up Aeroflot and instead of getting Aeroflot is Russia's leading airline, or lots of little black boxes because you don't have Cyrillic set up, you actually get Aeroflot, bookings, lost property, delayed flights, refunds or whatever. All of that kind of structured information, we use schema.org information as input to generate it. There's no guarantees, there's no magic, but if you do use schema.org correctly, you generally get a lot of benefit in terms of how search engines find you and present your content. So a couple of areas that we've been working on recently. Sports is one that's sort of interesting idea for a multilingual web. It turns out that sports globally are a really big deal. Not everywhere. There are countries that really don't do much in the way of sport. And different sports are very, very different. So civilized countries are all fascinated by and obsessed by cricket, as you will no doubt be aware. And the sort of information you need for cricket and the sort of information people care about is just a totally different world from totally ridiculous games like that one with the little round ball that people kick around a paddock. I believe here it's called religion. Sorry, football. But as we structure these information spaces, as we structure our vocabularies, the kind of sports we played as kids turned out to have a huge influence on the sort of things we did when we tried to create stuff for sport. And actually looking at the different countries that people came from and the input that they provided, it was very easy to see who grew up with what sports by what their inputs were to how we developed this stuff. There are some other weird things. We have football stadia. We have terms for that, but we don't have a term for a hockey rink. This makes the Russians very, very upset. There's no term for a curling rink either, which I can't think how we forgot that, but we did. So there are lots of improvements that we need to make in, not just in language, but in actually localizing the ideas. One of the pieces of work that's been really complicated is actions, not just specific medical, muscle contraction, but things you can do. This has been very important because we're trying as search engines to provide faster access into the things you can do on a website. And when you get Aeroflot, I'll use again, when they come up in your results because you're looking for Aeroflot, being able to put in where you want to go to and from and the date on the search page and sending that information, so you jump into the content faster and you jump into the results faster. This is a thing we're trying to do. The terminology here is horrendously complicated, even in one language. One of the problems we face at Yandex is we have about 6,000 staff. Most of them are engineers. The vast bulk of them are Russian. And they understand English more or less. They often read English. They generally write reasonably comprehensible English. But discussing terminology turns out to be really difficult because we have language barriers just between the two groups of engineers. And extensibility of terms of language, because a vocabulary is a vocabulary and it's one of the features of any language, turns out to be a general issue, not just an actions one. Finally, I said we use microdata. Microdata was originally a political decision. When Google, one guy at Google was building the schema.org idea plan, he took microdata for sort of technical and sort of political reasons. There are big communities around RDFA, around JSON-LD, other ways of expressing data, so we've adopted those too. But at Yandex, we looked at these different possibilities, and the engineers, who are Russian speakers, said, well, we've got time to translate about one spec and read it, and the microdata one is the one we're going to do because it's short. Terrible decision. It's a night. Of all of the ways of providing data, microdata is bad compared to most other possibilities. It's really simple. It's really limited. We run into concrete problems that cause us to lose time and suffer. And we run into them because the spec was the one available easily. A few things to look forward to: faster updates, improving microdata, better documentation, schema.org actually covering the world at large, the things that the whole world does, not just the things that matter in California and in Moscow. Спасибо.
Thanks for the talk.